Well, hello and welcome back to my channel. So today I would like to talk to you more about securing our web apps. And what I'm just going to do is continue from where we left off with the project that we've been building since the start of this tutorial series. But what I would want to talk about today would be not like the conventional basic authentication processes that you could employ to secure our web apps, things like using, say, user password combination or sessions, as the case may be. But what I would want to do today is more or less to like go deeper and talk about how you could manage a scenario whereby you have a lot of users and you want to restrict what each of those users has permission and access to see in your application. And of course, in real applications, or even let's say in cloud solutions, like real enterprise large applications, like even say AWS and the likes of Azure, this is also more or less implied, whereby certain users are allowed or denied access to certain resources. And there are a couple of ways this is actually being achieved. One of them could be maybe to use an access control list. The other one would be maybe to use role-based access control, RBAC. And what I can quickly also show you more or less is an example. I just created this JSON, as you can see over here. This is an example of a policy document from AWS. And then if you look in this JSON, it's actually pretty straightforward. You have a version and then you have statements. Within the statements, you have a list of permissions that a certain user, or that's a resource or a user in the end, to whom this policy will be attached in the end, the resources they have access to. So if you look over here, just forget about this, is more or less like an ID, but the important things are actually these three parts. So this one says effects. The effect is allow. The action is IAM, change password, and the resource is everything. So it means when this is attached to a given user, that user will have access. That's what this allow over here is. If it is not allow, it can also be denied. But I'll just leave it as allow for now. And what it means is whoever or whatever resource to whom this policy document is attached to, one of the permissions they would have would be to be able to change passwords on all more or less resources. So asterisk means everything. And here also same is applied. So this permission will allow this person or resource to be able to list all S3 buckets and in more or less in this account. And this one again would allow two things: to list S3 buckets and to get S3 buckets. And then now it's not allowing permission to every resource, but here there are just two resources. And one of them is this confidential data bucket. And again, this one would be beyond this bucket. So this would more or less be everything up until this point. And then pretty much similar again, asterisk is to give a permission to everything. And then there is a condition again attached here, where this would check if let's say if this is attached to a user, to check if this user has multi-factor present, and if that is true, then this can proceed, otherwise this will be denied. So you can already imagine for let's say a given user, there could be 5-10 of these policy documents attached to this user. And what it means is for this user to do any single thing, say within the AWS cloud, all of these 10 policy documents will be evaluated before that user can be given access. And of course, you can already imagine if you employ something like this in a web application, which of course is already the case, you spend a really good amount of time verifying permissions and stuff. And there are of course other third-party libraries like Okta, where you can already have like a completely separate running service, basically just for evaluating user permissions. So what it means, if you want to get items, you first make a request to this service, verify the permissions this user has, and then come back to actually fetch what you get. And I think this is actually a cool approach, but I mostly actually don't go this route just because of the overhead it has. It adds to me building applications because I really like to squeeze out every bit of speed I can from my applications. And so what I would want to do in this tutorial is not to show you how to go this policy documents route or maybe use ACLs or similar approaches, but I would want to show you a different approach that I mostly employ, and most of the time it's more than sufficient to do what I would want to do, and of course it's also pretty fast. And what I will do now is basically move over to draw IO and then show you a couple of sketches. Maybe before I do that, I would also want to show you this other file I have over here, policy.conf. So this is one configuration file you might be required to create if you're working with open source tools like Caspin. So with Caspin, you get to define your policy configuration this way. You have your definitions, request definition, policy definition, and then the effects in the end, and of course matchers. So this matchers would, when they evaluate the true, then this goes through. And then this is again, you can think of it again going in the direction of working with policy documents, only that in this case it's a different approach, but in the end you also can implement RBAC policies or even hierarchical RBAC policies to users and resources depending on what you are trying to achieve in the end. But again, I'll just go over and then show you my own approach. So right now we are in draw.io, and I think it's currently renamed as this app.diagrams.net. In the end, it's still the same. You can still see that over here on the title. And this is really nothing fancy. More or less, this is a tool I've been using for quite a while now to more or less when I want to put some ideas into like a picture more or less to help me articulate my ideas, and of course to design and draw up architectural drawings. You can actually see one over here which is like a really much more complex application, enterprise application that I'm also currently working on, but this what we are doing of course would be nowhere as complex as this. It doesn't have to be. The whole point for me doing this tutorial is more or less to more or less let you understand how the basics work. So again, back to what we would want to do. So remember when you would have a couple of resources and you want certain users having certain permissions to certain resources, or when you would want certain resources to be able to communicate with other ones, employing a couple of these approaches actually like a really useful, or proves to be a very useful one. If you have like file server and you would want certain users to be able to read certain files, this is really very much employed. Also in the area of let's say in networking, for example, in network security groups, as the case may be, this is really very useful. But for our own case, what I would show you would not be to take this approach, because again I think sometimes it might really be an overkill for a web application, and that's why I have my own resource. And so what I've done is more or less just create this container over here and then put a couple of icons, as you can see over here. And the first thing I try to do is to more or less try to articulate the kind of resources that will be available in the application that I'm building. So for our own hypothetical application, I'm just going to assume would have a number of things. I need to make this a lot bigger so you can see what I'm writing actually. So I'll make this 24. So now you can see. So I am, for this one, I'm assuming that in the end, there's on the general level, there's going to be like organizations, and under organizations there's going to be groups, and within the groups there would be users, and those users under each of those users, let's say there's going to be let's just assume we have something called items, and in this case this could actually be anything that you would want those users to have permission to manage. So I'm just going to regard those as items right now. And what I can also do is to not just having this over here, I can also maybe under organizations I would want to add other layers, say let's we can start with continent, country, city, something like this. So let's just assume this is the hierarchies I would want to have in my application, so that on the topmost level we have organizations, then organizations can span continents, countries, cities. Now within those cities, then there's going to be like groups, and under those groups users, and then under the users there's going to be the items that we would work with. So this could be like machines in a plant, this could be computers or whatever it is that your users would require access to in the end. And even these items can again be grouped, but I'm just going to leave one level for now just to make it a lot simpler. So for me, the thought process is here. Why would I need to add an additional layer of logic evaluating documents when I can actually bake this into my application in such a way that when I make a query, I'm already applying resource-based access control. Like this was the thought process for me, and that's actually why how this was given birth to. Actually, right now I'm also trying to build like a really nice production ready library that anyone can actually use more or less in their application. So if you have anything at all that you would want to manage, say with users, you can already use this library, and it gives you the option to just one hand define like these hierarchies as I've defined it over here, and then it will manage everything else for you under the hood. And this is ongoing. I don't know how long this is going to take until it's complete, but of course I'm going to keep you posted over here. So but to do that, to represent this hierarchy here, I have this diagram here, and I can actually call this my organization. So under organization, I'm going to have let's say I add another text here. I can actually copy this one, put it in here, so I don't need this now. So let's say I have my continent here, and under continent I have country, like we already said, and under country I have city, and other city, and now I have my groups. So this would represent my group, and this would represent a user, and this will represent an item. So what it means now is I can actually select all of this. I can undo this. I can actually select all of this. Let me get rid of this first, so it's taking a little space. So I can actually copy this and duplicate it a couple of times, and just it can help you begin to form a mental picture. And now I can actually bring this up here. So what it means is I can now maybe add a diagram, and I take it to the back. Is it to the back, to back, and then I can do it like this. And now I can duplicate this and put this to the back as well, and create another one, bring it over here and put it to the back. So it's going to be like a container. So what it means is within this organization there's going to be all these possible groupings, and now we can just maybe connect this together. So connect it like this. And now you can maybe begin to understand what we are trying to do. So what it means is that we start within the organization and then we go down in this route. And then of course, to represent all of this, I can now create a single long string down here and put it in. And then of course I would need to now I would like to bring all of them together, and I can use colons this way, or I can also use backslash. And now something like this would be what I'd like to refer to as scope. So I try to scope every item or every entity more or less in this application. And what it means is that I bring this over here. So I use the concept of scopes. And what it means is that this item down here, the scope would be something like this. I bring this over here to point to this guy. And maybe I zoom out a little bit. And what it means is I can maybe reduce the font for this one to 24 or maybe 14. No, that's too small, 18. So what it means is that for this item here, what this scope would look like would be something like this. And then I'll have some ID, and I can call this maybe 12. So this item here, this one here would have this scope. And maybe I copy it again, bring it over here to this one down here. And then this scope might be something like this, say 15. And what it means is that this root organization is, the scope is going to be something like this. It's going to be something like just the ID, and then I can put here maybe 001. So this would be the scope for this guy. And you can already imagine if you want to add the scope for this continent, then it's going to be something like this. Now I can remove this one, and I remove this one. And so for this continent, the scope would now be, for this organization, to now be 0001 / this continent, maybe Europe. This would be the scope for this. And then if we want to have the same for this country, then it's going to be something like this, because of course we can't have duplicate countries anyway. So here could be Germany, and then you can already imagine that if we have this user down here, this user scope is going to be something like this. So it's going to be Germany, and city, maybe I say Berlin, and then group, maybe I say admins, so that this guy belongs to the admin group, and then this user ID, maybe 005. Something like this. So this can already start giving you a picture that's within, for everything in this application, every single entity in this application is going to have scopes. And this is really forming the base, or more or less forms the basics of how I set up my own way of implementing authentication. That way, the advantage again is that I do not need to do any additional evaluation, more or less, to see what permission a user has and what resources they can see. I define these scopes this way, bake them into the application in such a way that when I make a query, I can already check, let's say if this user over here, for example, makes a query and would want to see resources, let's say in this, let's say that there is a group called let's say HR, and if he's not supposed to see that item because of this scope, it will of course prevent that when you make the query. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples in the application. So let's jump over to the code editor so I can show you this in more practical terms. So we are back in the code editor. The first thing I want to do right now would be to add a couple more columns to our user table, and I'm quickly just gonna add those here. I'm just gonna keep this as fast as possible. I'm just gonna copy this and put in here, and then I would call this user role, and I'll call this user scopes, something like this. So this is going to be a string, and this is going to be for now make it an array of strings. Sorry, I'm writing too much TypeScript. And so the name here, of course, we'll name this as user role. Now let's keep it like this. Oh no, I don't need an empty space. This is fine. User role, and of course I need to specify that here in the column name, and here I have user scopes, and again I'll put this in here. And what I would quickly do more or less would be to go over to the database and make sure that I have these two columns more or less, and then we can of course start right away. So I've gone ahead to create those two columns that we require, and so for this tutorial again I'm just going to keep it simple, but I just want you to understand the basics, and of course you can expand on this for your own applications. And maybe what I can already do is maybe change this one from like an array of strings to a JSON. So I can use data types that GOM provides, but of course you can already imagine if you're building like a really large application where there could be possibility to have lots and lots of permissions that you would want to attach to a user. It would make sense to have those permissions in a separate table, and then with a foreign key it's attached to every user, so that way you can of course have this in separate places and not have it here bloated. But this is how I'm gonna leave it for now. So it's for now. I'm just gonna again show you how this should work. And one thing I've also gone ahead to do is so in our logic here we had this function get token, and what I've gone ahead to do here, because if you remember in our previous tutorial we talked about how we could provide tokens in the headers, and we persist these tokens as HTTP only cookies, and then they are supposed to be provided again back to us when the user makes a request. So I've just gone to add this more or less one line of code that basically tries to get this cookie from the cookie in the incoming request, and if it exists then we provide this token. Only if we can't find this token in the cookie that we then try to find this in the authorization header, and if we still can't find it, then of course we error out the user and tell them no token was provided. That's really just what's happened here. And of course the create user, we used it in the past to create a couple of users, but what I would do now more or less would be to we don't need this line anymore, it's fine. So what I would do now more or less would be to again go back to creating our users, and then we can see how we can of course use this, and then see how we can use this in our queries to fetch resources. So what I can quickly do is maybe use the HTTP file we created in the past. But what I can do is, just so I don't have to provide this new token each time, of course we can use Insomnia to make use of the cookie that we persist as HTTP only cookie, but I can still use this anyways and provide the cookie as a header. So I can create a variable here. I can call this token, and this is going to be some value, and we would get this when we visit the login page. So we can quickly just try to log in. Of course our server is down, so go run main.go, and the server is up, and now we try to log in again, and then when we log in we get this. If you see over here, it's actually in the cookie. We are still returning this as a payload, but they should be the same anyways. So what we can do is to copy this one from here, and then I'll just put this in this variable we created over here. And so now if we go to, let's say, get users, I can now remove this from here and use the one we had over there, and it was called token. So that way we don't have to paste this everywhere. And so now we try to get all users, and we see we had just one user, the one we created in the past. Here is a hashed password, and this was when it was created. And of course, these new columns that are added, you can see them over here. For this user, they are empty. So this is a string and this is like a JSON for now. So what we can do is to come over here and try to create a couple of users. And here I can of course pass the user role. And for now I can say this as global admin like this. And I pass user scopes. And this would be an array. And for this array, I'm just going to be a little bit creative. So I can say org1. So remember again, we have the organization, we had the continent. I can call this Europe, country, I can call this Germany, and city, can I say Berlin, and then group, I can say admin, and then I can actually leave it as this. So this user scope this user would have permission to do everything an admin can do in Berlin. That's just what it means. And I can give it another permission. Actually, I can maybe copy this one, bring it over here. And now I give it a permission in Munich as an admin as well. And I can also add a third one and maybe give it a permission, let's say in Frankfurt. But instead of an admin in Frankfurt, I would like him to have a developer role. And of course, these roles, we have to predefine them first. So I can now call this guy admin user like this, and here I can call him admin, and he's going to be a global admin and he's going to have all these permissions. And then I can save, create this user, and the creation was successful. And now we can actually go back to get users, and then we try to get all the users, and then we should be able to see the new user we created and the permissions that he has. So what I would want to go ahead to show you now is more or less how to bake this into the requests that this user can make, so you can actually see this in action. Or maybe one thing you could have also quickly noticed is that over here in this create request, even though we didn't provide any authorization here, that like this, it still went through. This is not a flaw in our logic, only that we don't have this token verification already implemented for the create handler. So if you see here, the only thing that it's actually doing is just to verify the request and then going ahead to create it, nothing fancy. But if we go to get, where we're fetching all the users, we have this implemented already. So what I can actually quickly do is maybe just copy this here. I don't need to think too much about it. And then over here, I'm just going to paste it in here. And it should now be fine. So give that a couple of minutes. And how are we using our claims? So for now, we're just printing the claims, and that's also fine. I'm just going to again print the claims for this guy. And we can think about how we want to use this in the future. That's totally fine. And so what it means now is that if I should restart this server and start it again, and try to create this user one more time, this should not go through. So now to be able to use the scopes that we've attached all our users, I would like to make a couple of modifications to our code. And again, this would give you insights as to how you can actually then go ahead and use this. So the first thing I would do, I would just maybe collapse all of this, and I can actually delete this. We don't need these files because we're not going in this route anyways. And I might want to create a folder here. I'll call this service. And inside of service, I'm going to create a file called roles.go. So of course, package, if I can type, package service. And now I would like to define a couple of attributes that my role could have. So more or less the model. So and this is going to be an interface so that all rows have to implement. So I can call this user role model. Of course, it's going to be an interface. it's going to have a couple of attributes. So for now, I'm just going to limit this to fetching of users. Again, this can be extended to whichever number of resources and entities you have in your application. So I would like to have one called user permission read. So this is going to define the permissions that a user has when it comes to reading users. So it's going to, of course, it's going to be a function that takes GomDB, and it should return a pointer to GomDB, something like this. Pretty straightforward. And again, I'm going to have another one for writes. So what it means is that every role that we implement in our application has to implement all of these interfaces, all of these functions in this interface. And other than this, I would like to add two more, maybe one more function. So that would be a function to pass the scopes that a user has. So I can call this pass user scope, and it's again just going to be pretty similar to this one. So it's going to take a pointer to GomDB, and apart from this, it's going to take maybe a couple of basic scopes. So I can call this base scopes, and I'm just going to more or less dump everything in here. So but again, other than that, the signature is going to remain the same. So GomDB and GomDB, and at the end it's just going to give me an array of functions that have this signature, that take a pointer to GomDB and return a pointer to GomDB. So this is going to allow me to pass the scopes that the user has. And here what you can already do is, let's say we also have organizations. Maybe on top of this we can just put this over here, and I can, instead of user now, I can call this org permission read and org permission write. And again, of course, I need to provide down here a method that has to pass org scopes like this, and then this would more or less be the template. If you have a lot more entities, then define them like this. Pretty straightforward. And now would have to go ahead to define what a model or a role actually means. So what I can now do is, maybe in the roots I would create a folder, and I can call this user roles like this. And then in here I would define all the rows, or the possible rows you could have in our application. So I could have one called global admin.go, because it provides a package. I could have one that's called maybe org admin. I can already have an idea what we're trying to do. And I could have one that's called maybe say regular, I don't know, regular user.go. Whatever the possible permissions are in your application. And I can start with global admin, because I think this is actually going to be quite straightforward to implement. But before that, I would like to define a basic role that's all the roles have to implement and inherit from. So I can call this base.go. Again, define the package as well. And now I would like to, maybe, because this would be like an enum, and then we then have to go ahead and implement this for all our possible rows. And of course, we can again create a function that's more or less would tell us what permission a user has based on the attributes that are present in the user object. So I would like to start by defining what my role would be represented as. So I would like to represent it here as an int64. So I can call this role int64. and I'll define a couple of constants. Based on this, I can have let me start with global admin of type role. I'm gonna, because I'm using int, so I can just make this iota, and then the next one would be my no, maybe I like to have my I have a row called super admin, so this would actually have god mode more or less. And now I have my global admin, and other than that, I can also have maybe org admin. You can actually get creative here and have things like continent admin, country admin, city admin, whatever it is you want to have, and maybe regular user. And then I can have just one that says on implemented row. So this is when you provide a row that doesn't match anything we have, and I just provide a string method for this. I can define my function this way. This will be a receiver function on our role type, and it will be a string method like I said. So it should be able to return a string to us, and what we can do is to use a switch as against our rows, so we should be able to pass our role here. So of course this will be a receiver function. So we switch with respect to the row that is being provided. We need to handle all the different possible cases. So if it's a super admin, what we would want to do more or less is just to return a string that says super admin like this, and we just have to do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it for all of them, and then just to save us some time. So as you can see over here, I've gone ahead to define all of these methods as based on these rows that we defined up here. And the next thing I would want to do again is to create a function that takes a string and then returns the role for us, the row representation of that string. So again, I'm going to implement this as a receiver function on our row type. So this is a row. The function is going to be called role. It's going to take a string and return a row. Again, we have to switch here again on our role. So I'll switch on the role, and then again we more or less do the inverse. So if it is super admin, so case if it is super admin, then we return super admin. And then again, I'm just going to go ahead and implement it for the rest. Yeah, I've also gone ahead to implement this for the rest of them. But I think to keep this as simple as possible, I'm just gonna maybe get rid of all of these ones, and we really don't need this much for our demo, and I can get rid of all of this. That should be totally fine, it's not a problem. And the next thing, of course, that I would want to have over here, apart from the method that we've implemented already, will be a function that takes still going to be a receiver function on our row type, but it's going to take a string and then return the actual model for us. So if we pass like a global admin, for example, we should be able to return an implementation, more or less, one that implements, of course, this is what we defined over here in our service. In this, if we go back here again, it should be able to return for us a user role model that implements all of these methods. And again, it's going to be a receiver function on our role, and I can call this row model. So it's going to take a scope. The scope is going to be a string, and now I can actually call this okay, let's leave this as this for now, and then we'll fix it in the future. So but it's going to return two things. It's going to return service, either this or an error. So I have to close this up again, and now we switch again on our role. So if it is super admin, and then we have to again do this for all of them, but for now I'm just gonna take this one out and then return I'm just gonna return nil and nil for now, because we've not implemented all of this. So I'm just gonna go to our global admin and then put some implementations in here, just to help us more or less be able to define like all these things that we require. And so to do that for our global admin, I'm going to define the type, and I can call it global. I'm probably just going to implement this just for the global admin, and I'll leave you to try out the rest and let me know how it goes. So I define the type here. It should have a role, it should be a string, it should have user scopes. Again, this is gonna be, I'm gonna leave this for now as an array of strings, and it's gonna provide, again, I'm gonna have roles. It should be an array of strings. So just so we don't get it confused, so this one is gonna be something like I said, global admin, and this of course will be the scopes that define a user's permissions, and this one down here is just to tell me list of possible roles in the application. So just so you don't have it twisted, actually. That's really the point here. And now maybe I also come over here, I define a variable. It's going to be of course available in the whole of this package. I can call this rows. It's going to be an array of strings, and here I'm just going to pass things like global admin, and I'm going to pass, what else do I want to have? For now I say super admin, and I can have last one that says regular user, and I think that should be all. Yes, I think that should be all for now. And so what I would just do ahead now is more or less to implement a couple of methods on this global admin, just so that it satisfies the requirements of the interface that we created over here. That's what I would want to do next. So I can create a function. I'll call this new global admin. So it's going to take a role, and it's also going to take a scope, and the scope is going to be an array of strings, and it should be able to return global admin. And pretty straightforward, we'll just return this like this. So, sorry, my bad. So global admin, and then role would be this dot string, because we implemented the string method. Rows would be this guy up there, and then user scopes will be scopes. I can call this scopes, not scope. And that's more or less it, but we can't use this right away in our base scope, because if you see, if we have this, for example, global admin, so that if we have a global admin, we'd like to return new global admin, we'll pass the role, we'll pass our scope. I can actually call this scopes, it's fine. And that's it. 1 second. And of course we need to again pass nil down here, but this is not gonna be fine now because if you look over here, you still see that there are some unimplemented methods. So that's why I said we can't use this as it is right away. We have to implement those methods first for you to satisfy the constraints that this interface puts in place. And that was what I wanted to show you. So but we can again go ahead and implement those methods on this global admin struct over here. So we can have a function, it's a receiver function, more or less. I can call this GA for global admin, and the first one is user permission read. So a global admin, I'm guessing, should be able to actually more or less do anything. So it's gonna take gumdb and return gumdb like this. We save that so it imports it for us. And so, but I'm guessing that a global admin should have permission to read everything. And to give him that permission, we simply make use of these hooks that we have in with GOM to make it a lot easier for us. So again, we pass our db, should be of type gom.db, and it should return pointer to gom.db. And what I would want to do here is more or less I would simply return db. So this would actually put no restrictions to read anything more or less on the global admin. But what we can also do, if we want to restrict the global admin to their own organization, we can say we can add a where clause, and in this where clause you can actually now maybe add things like where scope, like we provide a value this way, and now we can maybe add something like this. So I can maybe of course use this method over here, and then I can add the scope of this global admin. So I can say ga.scopes, and I'm guessing it's just gonna, for now I'm just guessing that global admin is just gonna have one scope, and I close this up again with ampersand. This should be fine. So what it means is that my global admin is probably, for a given organization, is going to have just one scope, and that scope is going to look something like, let's say, org1, something like this, or more or less the ID of this organization or the name. So we call this org1. So the scope that this global organization is going to have for this organization is just going to be this. And then what it means is that this, with what the query we've added here, it means that this global admin would have permission to read everything that has scope starting with this organization. So if we make a query, he'll be able to see only all the things that pertain to this organization, nothing more. And of course we can copy the same and do it for write. So user permission write, and basically the same thing. He will be able to read and write everything within this organization. It's actually this straightforward. So, but for now, if we go back here to our base, if we uncomment this, it should still not be fine because we still have a couple more unimplemented methods. And if we go back to actually that service, because I don't really want us to take care of this for now, so I'm just going to remove this one and remove scope. So now you're just gonna expect us to implement one more method called parse user scopes, which is also what you see over here. So of course, to make this fine, what I would just do is to implement the last method that this expects us to implement. This again is going to be a receiver function, our global admin, and the function should be called parse user scopes. or I can actually call it just use, I don't know if it makes, I think it makes more sense actually make it plural. So go over to this and call this scopes, because the user is going to have multiple scopes. So I call this pass user scopes, and yes, that's totally fine. And now again, we're going to pass a pointer to our gum.db. And other than this, I'm just going to pass a method, an argument that I call base scopes. And this should be like a list of other possible scopes that we would want to pass to this argument. So it's going to be like hooks. And again, it's going to be similar to this. So it's going to take a gum.db and return a gum.db. And that's more or less it. So we have this is our function, and yes, of course, in the end our function should be able to return an array of functions. That's return gum.db, take gum.db as an argument, and then of course return gum.db like this. And what else is the problem here? So scopes, now this should now be an array of strings, so that should be fine. So this now, as you can see, we don't get any error anymore because this has implemented all the methods we expected to implement. So but now we have to provide the implementation. So I'm going to create one here, and I can call this scopes. It's going to be a variable, and it's just going to have this type. So if you notice, we'd be using this signature so much in our implementation. So what we can do would be to one second. So the first thing I would want to do would of course be to append the base scopes. So I can say scopes is equal to append, and I pass my base scopes like this. And the next thing I would want to do is to so for the global admin, again, I am assuming he's gonna just have one permission which is tied to his organization. So there's really no need to do any for loop here. So because again, I know it's just gonna be one attribute. So I append one more thing, and what I would want to append here would be a function of this signature, and this is gonna return a db that's where, and it's gonna be like scope like this. And I'm just gonna copy what we have over here, which is this one, and put it here. And that should do it. And of course, after everything, I return my scopes, and that's totally fine. So what we've done here more or less is if you look here, actually for this global admin, since all the permissions on all the requests that this global admin will be performing would of course have to pass the scopes, and then we'll of course add this permission, this particular permission, depending on what task that user is trying to do. So what you can actually quickly do is for this global admin is to remove this and simply return db. So that's when we pass scopes, when we call this pass scopes, we can also pass this, let's say, user permission read to it. So that way this already is in here. So we don't need to put this down here actually. So this should be fine like this. And you can actually take a leap from this to perform, to more or less do the same for all the users. And in this case, actually, org admin should actually be the same as this global admin. Maybe I'm just gonna copy everything in here and put it for this org admin. And I can call this, so instead of calling this, I can call this org admin, or I can just write it in full organization admin like this. and this would be new organization admin. So organization admin, and we have to change it everywhere. So just so this is actually intuitive. Again, I don't need to redefine this anymore because we have one in this package already. And then this global admin, I can actually now rename it to super admin. So the super admin is supposed to have like God mode more or less. And what it means is that for super admin, there is no need for all of this because he has to see everything. So there are no restrictions. So that would be the difference between a global admin and actually can just call this to make it more interesting. So this would be a super admin. So super admin, super admin, super admin, super admin, super admin, like this. And now we go to the base and we have super admin, and I can actually just get rid of this global admin. We don't need it anymore. Get rid of it here, and also here we don't need it. And yep, that's it. Super admin, org admin, regular use. So now we can have org admin, and do we still have this? No, I'm gonna again change this to new org admin like this, and then we change that here, of course. And I'm also going to copy, and of course we already have for our global, sorry, our super admin. So if we go back to super admin, how is it called? New super admin and org admin, yes, like this. So new super admin, and this one would be new organization admin. So something like this. And so what we can do now is to actually go ahead and test this out, so you see how this can actually be used in the end.